Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 of my favorite non-zombie, zombie horror movies of all time.
Not translate this message.
And let's get to the list.
These impulses are directed to the specially designed facial map.
He just smiled and said, dipping skinny.
Holy Christ.
What are you doing me?
Overlord.
Overlord is a 2018 action horror movie. Directed by Julius Avery, it stars Giovanna Adepo, Wyatt Russell, and Matilda Olivier. The plot follows several American soldiers who are dropped behind enemy lines the day before D-Day and discover terrifying Nazi experiments. Here we go! This is such a rad little movie, and it's actually the very first movie I ever reviewed on this channel. It's just such a gem. And it's funny because as much as I love it and as much as I've talked about it, I do hear some diehard people talk about it, it still really just flies under the radar. And I get it, it's not for everyone. It is a little bit campy, a little bit cheesy, but it's surprisingly well done, much more than you would ever expect it to be. And I'm sure a lot of people would never put this on any kind of best of list. But for me, I enjoy the fun of horror, a little bit of that campiness, a little bit of that humor, over the top, and sometimes put in a little bit of that superhero like Hellboy almost element into a horror movie is just an absolute blast and really goes a long way for me. So putting this list together, I had to throw this on here because I just have that much fun with it, on top of the fact that it really flies under the radar and deserves a lot more attention.
He just smiled and said, dipping skinny.
The Sadness is a 2021 Taiwanese body horror movie, written and directed by Canadian filmmaker Rob Jabez in his feature film debut. It stars Bharat Zhu and Regina. The plot's about a Taiwanese couple who attempt to reunite amidst a viral outbreak that turns people into homicidal, psychopathic sadists. Man, what a savage movie this is. It doesn't really get any more gory and gnarly and nasty than this. This is one of those movies that if you're not into gore and you're not into just seeing the most ruthless kills you could possibly imagine and just disgusting things happen on screen, then you really need to not check this out. But if you're a fan of especially the special effects and the practical work and the people that really put their heart and soul into creating these very visceral, realistic images on the screen, then I think this is an absolutely brilliant movie. It's loosely inspired by The Crossed, which is a graphic novel series. I don't know if it has any actual direct linkage to that, but it's very clear that that's where the inspiration comes from. But one of the more interesting elements about this is that these infected, these zombie-like people, they're very sexually motivated. They're very sadistic in that nature, and it's not just sex, it's pretty much any dark desire they have is just turned up to level 11. But it just gets so warped, so messed up, so uncomfortable and creepy. It's definitely not for everyone. But as far as infected, non-zombie zombie horror movies go, it doesn't get much better than this.
If this picture doesn't make you scream and squirm, you'd better see a psychiatrist. Quick.
Shivers is a 1975 Canadian sci-fi body horror movie, written and directed by David Cronenberg in his directorial debut. It stars Paul Hampton, Lynn Lowry, and Barbara Steele. After a scientist living in a high-end apartment complex slaughters a girl and himself, investigators discover that the murderer was carrying a parasite that turns the infected into sex-obsessed, violent maniacs. It is so wild to me that Cronenberg came out firing so strong, because this is his first movie and yet it still remains one of my favorites that he ever did. Just the style and pacing, the way it looks, the way the infected act, they are zombie-ish, and you can tell that he was inspired by Romero's zombies. However, there's a very different way that these zombies type of figures carry themselves, because they're not supposed to be the undead. They're not supposed to be mindless zombies coming back to life. These are these infected people that have this really strong motivation to do these crazy things. He has a very interesting way of just showing their compulsion and the way that they come at each other. And from the beginning, Cronenberg has these messages that he's trying to get across. His films aren't just this interesting, fun, entertaining ride. They're meant to be films with something to say. And this really focuses on the elite, the powerful, the wealthy, and just their obsessions. I think it's a brilliant movie, and it's one of Cronenberg's that just kind of flies under the radar and isn't talked about as much as some of his others. But if you're a fan of his films, this is one you have to see. The Crazies is a 2010 horror movie, directed by Breck Eisner and a remake of the 1973 film of the same name. It stars Timothy Olyphant, Rhoda Mitchell, and Joe Anderson. After a strange and unsecured plane crash, an unusual toxic virus enters a quaint farming town where a young couple are quarantined, but they fight for survival with a group of others.
Whoa, 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 whoa. What the hell are you doing? Rory, you lay that gun down.
So I really struggled if I should put this one or the original The Crazies. And it's hard because that is such a classic and it really is a fantastic movie, but I wanted to put this one. And the main reason is because I feel like not enough people recognize this as a great modern horror movie, and especially a remake, because there's not a lot of remakes that really do as good of a job of remaking the original as this does. On top of that, I'm a fan of Timothy Olyphant. I just really appreciate, and Rhoda Mitchell, both of them, just the way they come at the screen and feel so real and likable. And it really pulls you into this situation and you really find yourself on the edge of your seat. This was also a movie that I rewatched for the first time in quite a while during the pandemic. And just the realism, the way this movie captures this quarantine and you not being allowed, and police state kind of thing, you not being allowed to do the things you want to do, it's terrifying. And when I was looking out the window and we were kind of seeing a lot of these same things happening in the real world, it was a pretty scary situation. So the original does have a place in my heart, and I definitely appreciate it. In a lot of ways, this is me talking about both, because I really appreciate and enjoy both these movies for different reasons, and I really think both these movies deserve more love. It's one of Romero's movies that you just don't hear people talk about, and then this, no one ever talks about it, especially when you're talking about great remakes, and this is a really, really well done remake. So if it's been a while since you've seen this, I think it's high time you give it a rewatch, because I think you'll be surprised how well this holds up.
He just smiled and said, "Dipping skinny."
Pray it doesn't happen to you. Rabid.
Rabid is a 1977 independent body horror movie. Written and directed by David Cronenberg, it stars Marilyn Chambers, Frank Moore, and Joe Silver. A young woman develops a taste for human blood after experimental plastic surgery, and her victims turn into bloodthirsty zombie-like creatures, leading to a citywide epidemic. So this one does a lot of the same things that Shivers does. It's just a little more advanced. You can really see Cronenberg polishing his skills and getting better at what he does. But I really appreciate how this movie has this real hybrid feel to it, because in some ways it feels like a vampire movie, other ways it feels like an infected, and then it also feels very zombie-like. And so you just take all three of those things and put them together, and it makes for a really creepy, interesting movie. And the body horror element really becomes much more strong in this. The way that the girl feeds and basically infects other people, it's just a very interesting device, not like her biting their neck and, what you're used to seeing, but much more of an elegant, interesting, body horror eccentric way of doing it. I also really love the rule setting that this is in, and then mixed with when they get into the town and you got that real 1970s European vibe to it. I think it's a very cool movie that's unique and entertaining and definitely deserves to be on this list.
These impulses
are directed to the specially designed facial
math.
Just smiled and said, dipping skin
They want my blood. It's their lives or mine. I still get squeamish.
The Last Man on Earth is a 1964 post-apocalyptic sci-fi horror movie based on the 1954 novel I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, directed by Ubaldo Ragona and Sidney Salco. It stars Vincent Price and Franca Batoya. The story's about Dr. Robert Morgan, the lone survivor of a plague that causes the infected to turn into zombie-like figures.
Another day to live through. Better get started.
So this is one of my absolute favorite all-time classic movies, period. I think it's Vincent Price at his absolute best. And you gotta realize when this movie takes place, it was shot and created in the middle of the Cold War. So there was still very much this scare of the Russians and nukes and all of that craziness. The world ending was very much on our doorstep. So I'm not an expert by any means on any of that, but I do know that that had an impact on the novel as well as the movie in general. But this really walks the line between zombie and the sick infected because they're mindless, but not exactly. And it doesn't feel dramatically different than Night of the Living Dead, but there is definitely a difference. These figures are still people, they're just infected. They're much more of this rage virus, more to that side than they are the Romero zombie side. But there's so much heart and drama in this movie. Vincent Price will just break your heart with his dialogue in this movie. It's just incredible. He does such a fantastic job of it. And as much as I did enjoy I Am Legend with Will Smith, I think that's a great movie. When I have to decide between the two, because I don't want to put both of them on this list, there was no question that I think Vincent Price's performance and this movie is gotta be ahead of that. Even though I do like it and do think I Am Legend is a solid movie, I'm sorry, Will Smith, you are no Vincent Price. But there's no question for me when I was putting this list together what movie I was gonna put. I definitely had to include The Last Man on Earth.
directed to the specially designed
smiled and said,
Rec is a 2007 Spanish found footage horror movie, written and directed by Yelmi Balaguero and Paco Plaza. It stars Milana Velasco, Pablo Rasso, and Jorge Yaman Serrano. It's about a reporter who, with her cameraman, accompany a group of firefighters on an emergency call to an apartment building and discover an infection spreading inside. So this movie really changed the world as far as what was expected from found footage, because to this date, nothing had been done that was this visceral, this intense, and felt absolutely real. Everything from the dialogue, the way that it's shot, the characters, even the side characters, the background characters, just everybody in this really feels real. The setup and the way that you're first introduced to these infected, and just the way they're kind of this weird between sick and zombie, it's fantastic. I really wanted to talk about it on the zombie list, but as I was putting that list together, I was like, this isn't really zombies. I decided though to put this list together and put Rec on it, because when you're talking about zombie-like movies, they're not the undead, they're these wild, infected, human-like creatures you have to talk about Wreck because it's as intense and powerful and well done as any movie that's ever been done like this.
Impulses are directed to the specially designed facial
Evil Dead is a 2013 supernatural horror movie, directed by Fede Alvarez in a reimagining of the 1981 film The Evil Dead. It stars Jane Levy, Shiloh Fernandez, and Lou Taylor Pucci. The story follows a group of people under attack by a supernatural entity in a remote cabin in the woods.
Leave this book alone.
You don't understand.
So this is a movie that I wasn't quite sure if it should go on this list, but I don't really know where it falls. It's not really zombie. I guess it could be more in a supernatural, but that's too broad. But it definitely has these zombie-like figures throughout this movie. People that are not alive, not dead, possessed by demons or whatever, but they're definitely a zombie type of figure that is not really the same person, but they're in that same body. And I'm sure a bunch of you out there are gonna question it, but it doesn't really matter that much to me. I wanted to talk about these movies, and they feel like they at least somewhat fit in this category. And this is one of my absolute favorite remakes ever done, because it takes that source material, it takes the original Evil Dead, which is an absolute masterpiece, takes that concept, flips it on its head, and does something very different with it. It comes at you with a much more serious, scary, just intense way of doing it. And yes, the original Evil Dead was much more scary, much more intense, but because of the low budget and various reasons, it feels silly. It feels a bit hokey. It doesn't exactly feel scary all the way. It doesn't exactly feel like it's meant to be taken serious. At least for me, I'm young enough that when I first saw it, it didn't exactly hold up to the other things that I considered to be scary. But that is in no way a slight on it, because the humor is a lot of what made the original Evil Dead such a fantastic movie. But to me, this is the one that leans fully into that intense, powerful, dread-filled, just terrifying kind of thing that this concept has in it. And it's what makes me so excited for Evil Dead Rise, which is right around the corner. And I'm just so excited because it has that to me. It looks like it's gonna have what this had. There's that really intense, just absolutely horrifying visuals, intense, gory, graphic violence, and it just looks like an absolute blast. But I'm a huge fan of this movie, and so I definitely wanted to put it on this list.
Smiled and said,
Do not translate this message. Not translate. Just listen to me.
Pontypool is a 2008 Canadian horror movie, directed by Bruce McDonald and based on the 1994 book Pontypool Changes Everything. It stars Stephen McHattie, Lisa Hull, and Georgina Riley. The plot's about a radio host who interprets the possible outbreak of a deadly virus, which infects the small Ontario town that he's stationed in. This is absolutely one of the most fun, entertaining movies I've seen in a very long time, and it's one that really no one hardly ever talks about, and it's an absolute travesty. Yes, it's a small scenario kind of movie. There isn't a whole big situation that it's in. The whole thing pretty much takes place inside of a radio station, and you don't even see a ton of what's going on because a lot of it is just what they're hearing through the radio, through phones and this and that, because a lot of what's going on is just on the outside. They're only hearing it in different ways, and they're basically trapped inside of this little radio station. But the acting and the performance by everyone involved is so intense, so entertaining and enjoyable, because not only is it terrifying at times, it's also funny. There's some really great humor and really fun situations. It's just wild to me that this movie does not get more love. A lot of the problem is it's not really ever streaming. I wish that one day it would get on Netflix, because I guarantee you, if it got on Netflix, everybody would know about this movie and it would just blow up. So if any of you guys are out there that are an exec for any of these big streaming services or have any sway whatsoever with them, let them know, hey guys, Shudder, you name it, let them know, get Pontypool. People in the horror world would freak out about this movie because it's absolutely fantastic.
Dipping skinny.
Swallow this.
Evil Dead 2 is a 1987 comedy horror movie. Directed by Sam Raimi, it's the second in the Evil Dead series and stars Bruce Campbell, Sarah Berry, and Dan Hicks. It's about the lone survivor of an onslaught of flesh-possessing spirits who must survive against the zombie-like figures once again.
There's something out there. It lives out in those woods. In the dark. Something that's come back from the dead.
So as much as I wanted to put the original Evil Dead on here, I wanted to also put the remake. And I wanted to put this one, Evil Dead 2. So I just decided, you know what? I'm going to talk about Evil Dead, but in reality, I'm just kind of putting them all here because I just didn't want to actually take up the spaces of Evil Dead and the remake and Evil Dead 2. But my personal favorite is Evil Dead 2. Even though in a lot of ways I respect and appreciate the original more, I have more fun with Evil Dead 2. It's just more funny, it's more campy, and it's the one that I grew up with more. I saw it a lot more than I did the original. Because most people, if you say, hey, you want to watch an Evil Dead movie, they're going to put this on or Army of Darkness, more than likely. At least for me when I was growing up. Not a ton of people were as much into the original Evil Dead as they were into Evil Dead 2 because it's basically the same movie. It's almost exactly the same setup, same situation, same set, just more bonkers, more over the top, just better everything, having more fun. But there is something to be said about the grit to the original because I think that visceral quality that they were, doing it all themselves, that really goes a long way. And as an adult now, when I watch the original, I very much appreciate it for what it is. And I'm not in any way trying to slight it. Like I said, it's kind of here in spirit. I just didn't want to actually take up the spot. But these are all amazing movies, including Army of Darkness. Just some of my absolute favorite movies ever made that I have just so much fun with and watch on a regular basis. So whenever I'm talking about zombie-like, non-zombie type of movies, I always bring up the Evil Dead franchise because they're just some of the most amazing, entertaining, great movies ever made. But that's my list. I would love to know what yours is. So down in the comments, let me know what you would put on this list. Let me know where I screwed up. What are the ones that you don't think belong on here? But remember too, this is my list, so please be respectful. It doesn't make me an idiot if you disagree with me. It just means that we don't exactly see movies exactly the same way. That's fine. But more than anything, I just love hearing your guys' opinions on stuff and what you guys love. And because so often I discover movies for the first time because of you guys. Because no matter who I am, no matter how many movies I'll watch, there are so many horror movies out there that I'll never see everything. So just hearing from you guys movies that are near and dear to you has just opened my eyes to so many other movies. It's just really mind-boggling. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that's the best way to keep track of this channel and when I post videos like this. And I post videos like this at least once every single week. I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to find out how you can help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to become a channel member, there's a little button right down there that says join, but you got to be on a PC. The little button's not there unless you're on a computer of some kind. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button, and remember guys, horror can be fun! If you enjoyed this, click right here to see 10 of my absolute favorite zombie movies, and I'll see you guys next time!